Hi everybody, this is section 10.2, which is graphing quadratic functions. We'll learn how to graph equations and inequalities in this section. Okay, here's a quick review and then I'll show you how to do it. Here's a graph of a quadratic function, which is a parabola, the u. The vertex is the highest or lowest point on the parabola. In this case, it's the lowest point. If it was an upside down parabola, it would be the highest point. Okay, the axis of symmetry is a line that cuts the parabola in half, where it mirrors each other, so you can see this point and this point, this point and this point. Okay, it goes through the vertex, if you notice, and it is the x-coordinate of the vertex. So if the coordinate of this vertex is 2, negative 1, the axis of symmetry, this line, is x equals 2. So here's your x-coordinate, and here's the equation of your axis of symmetry. So again, remember, a vertical line is x equals equation. So x equals negative 2, that gives you that vertical line, which is your axis of symmetry. Okay, and the way you find it, and I won't go through all the details, is x equals negative b over 2a. Okay, so in this equation, remember, this is a, this is b, and this is c. So you use negative b over 2a, and that's how you get the x-coordinate on the axis of symmetry and the x-coordinate for your vertex. And that's where you're always going to start when you start graphing. Okay, so here's the equation here. Y equals 2x squared plus 4x minus 3. So this one is an equation. And you can see already in the green, this one is going to be inequality. So I always start with the axis of symmetry, so negative b over 2a. So in this case, b is 4, so it'd be negative 4 over 2. And a is 2, so it's 2. Okay, so again, this is my b, this is my a, and this is my b. This is my c, and the c for now doesn't matter. Okay, so negative 4 over 4 is negative 1. So my axis of symmetry is negative 1. That's also my x-coordinate of my vertex. So what I want to do is put that one here in the middle. So if this is my vertex here, I want the vertex in the middle. And then what I do is I pick 2 points to the left and then 2 points to the right. So if I go left, I go negative 2, negative 3 here. And if I go right from negative 1, I go 0 and 1. And that's how you start your graphing. So that's why you always want to put that vertex or the axis of symmetry, the x-coordinate of the vertex, in the middle, and then find your other x's. And now we just fill it in. So starting with the vertex, if I put the negative 1 into this equation, I get 2 times negative 1 squared plus 4 times negative 1 minus 3. Okay, if I do this exponents first, I get 2 times 1 plus negative 4 minus 3. And this is 2 plus negative 4 is negative 2 minus 3 is negative 5. So my point is negative 1, negative 5. The 0 is easy. If I put the 0 in, I get 0 plus 0, 0, and I get negative 3. 0 plus 0 minus 3 is negative 3. But because this is my vertex, I know that the other point is going to be negative 3 as well. I can just fill it in on that side. And then instead of negative 3, I would rather use the 1. It's easy. If I put the 2 times 1 squared plus 4 times 1 minus 3, I get 2 times 1, which is 2, plus 4 minus 3, and that's 6 minus 3, which is 3. And I can put that 3 in there. Okay, so always start with your vertex. So you can see that this is my vertex here. And then go out 1 point and 1 point. So if I put the negative 1, negative 5, that goes here. That's my vertex. 0, negative 3 would be here. And the negative 2, negative 3 would also be here. And then the 1, 3 would be way up here. And then the negative 3, 3 would be way over here. Okay, so you can see my parabola, and I don't know how this is going to come up, but I'll try. And there's my parabola. You can see, and I'll mark the axis of symmetry here. You don't have to do this unless it says to, but here's my axis of symmetry, that if I folded it in half, the parabola would mirror itself. Okay, so again, here's my vertex, 2. Okay, so that's how you graph an equation. I will show you some more examples because it's the same thing as you do an inequality. Only thing there's 2 extra steps on top of it, but graphing the parabola itself is the same. Okay, so here's my equation, or inequality. Y is greater than or equal to negative x squared plus 6x minus 5. First thing I want to do is find my axis of symmetry. So negative b, again, this is my a and this is my b. So it's negative 6 over 2 times negative 1. Because a is negative 1 because it's negative x squared. Negative 6 or negative 2 is positive 3. Okay, so again, I put it in the middle over here. This is my vertex. 3, and then I just go up 4, 5, and I go down 2, 1. And now I fill them in. So if I start with the 3, I get negative, and then 3 squared. Notice only the 3 gets the parentheses, yeah, not the negative. Plus 6 times 3, and then minus 5. So this becomes negative 9 plus 18 minus 5. And that becomes 9 minus 5, which is 4. So this is my vertex. Okay. Now I can use 2 or 4, but I would, because they're not negative numbers or easy numbers, I would probably use the 1 and the 2, since they're smaller than the 4 and the 5, to solve. So if I start with the 1, if I put a 1 in there, negative 1 squared plus 6 times 1 minus 5, I would get negative 1 plus 6 minus 5, which is 0. And I know that this one is going to be 0. If I put a 2 in there, negative 2 squared plus 6 times 2 minus 5 is negative 4 plus 12 minus 5. And that would equal to 3. And I can put the 3 here. So again, this one would go here, and this one would go here, because they mirror each other on the opposite side of the vertex. And all I do is graph it. Starting with my vertex, 3, 4 is way up here. 2, 3 is here. And 4, 3 is also over here. And then 1, 0, and 5, 0. Okay. Because it's a greater than or equal to, if you remember when we drew the lines, it's going to be a solid line. If it was just a greater than, it would be a dashed line. Okay, and I have another example like that for you to remind you. And now we need to shade. Remember when we do inequalities, we shaded one side of the line or the other? So in this case, the easiest thing to do is choose a test point. In this case, I'm going to choose 0, 0. That's the easiest one. Okay. If it's true, I shade outside of the parabola where the 0, 0. If it's false, I would shade inside. So if I put a 0, 0 into this equation, put a 0 and a 0 and a 0 here for the y, I would get 0 is greater than or equal to 0 plus 0 minus 5, negative 5. And that is true. So 0, 0 is true. That means I need to shade everything outside of the parabola. Okay, again, if it was false, I would shade inside underneath the parabola. But because it's because it was true, the 0, 0, I need to shade the part with the 0, 0. Okay, so it's the same thing as drawing a parabola, the line. The only two things is the same thing when you drew a inequality line. It's either a dashed or a solid line, and you shade inside or outside of the parabola. Okay, here's one more last example for you. So y is greater than x squared plus x plus 1. So you notice it's going to be a dashed line because it's just greater than. So find the vertex. Here's my A, here's my B. So it's negative 1 over 2 times 1, which is negative 1/2. And I chose this one on purpose to give you a fraction in there. Okay. If this is my vertex, and I'm going to do it like this. This is my vertex. What I want to do is just choose, my vertex is going to be here, choose solid numbers or integers to the right and to the left. So if this is my negative 1/2, My next one is 0 and 1, this way, and -1 and -2. Okay, that's how you choose those numbers. So if you have a fraction. If you do it, solve it for the numbers, put the -1/2 in there. This one gets a little tricky. It's -1/2 squared plus -1/2 plus 1. This becomes 1/4 minus 1/2 plus 1. Okay, and that equals to 3/4. So the point is -1/2 comma 3/4, and I'll show you how to graph that as well. In this case, in the -1 or 0, I would choose a 0. It's always easier. 0 plus 0 plus 1, it would just be 1. And if I put a 1 in here, that's pretty easy. 1 squared is 1, plus 1, you get 3. So I can put the 1 here and the 3 here. Just put that one there and put that one there. Okay, now we need to graph it. So -1/2 comma 3/4. So go 1/2. 3/4 would be about there. Okay, so a little bit under the 1. 0 comma 1 would be here. And this case, if you want to use open circles to remind you to dash, you can. And then -1 comma 1 would be about here. Okay. You can use solid dots if you want. Again, same thing. 1 comma 3. 1, 2, 3 is here. -2 comma 3 is here. And remember, it's a dashed line, so I'm going to go dashed line. And now I need to test the point to see if I shade inside the parabola or outside. So I'm going to choose 0, 0 again, because that's the easiest one. If I put a 0, 0, 0. So it becomes 0 is greater than 0 plus 0 than 1, which is false. 0 is not greater than 1. Therefore, I need to shade away from the 0, 0, which means I need to shade inside of the parabola. Okay. So again, 0, 0 was false, so I need to shade inside of the parabola. That's the boundary line. Okay, that is section 10.2, graphing quadratic functions. Have a great day.